Let's begin in the U.S., where a much-anticipated congressional hearing featuring the CEOs of 4 of America's largest tech firms kicked off on Wednesday, with lawmakers locking horns while also offering a window into their ideas about reining in big tech. Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg, Amazon's Jeff Bezos, Alphabet Inc.-owned Google's Sundar Pichai, and Apple's Tim Cook, whose companies together represent about $5 trillion of market value, appeared via video conference before the House Judiciary Committee's antitrust panel.
Why would the Deputy Secretary...
Tensions between lawmakers were high during a much-anticipated congressional hearing on Wednesday, with 4 of America's most prominent tech CEOs in the hot seat. U.S. Representative David Cillian said the 4 companies were gigantic before the U.S. economy shut down in March because of the new coronavirus. But in the wake of COVID-19, they are likely to emerge stronger and more powerful than ever before.
Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, these corporations already stood out as titans in our economy. In the wake of COVID-19, however, they're likely to emerge stronger and more powerful than ever before.
He was quickly followed by Representative Jim Jordan, who accused the companies of taking a long list of actions that he said showed a try to hamper conservatives from reaching their supporters.
I'll just cut to the chase. Big tech's out to get conservatives. That's not a suspicion. That's not a hunch. That's a fact. July 20th, 2020, Google removes the homepages of Breitbart and the Daily Caller. Just last night, we learned Google has censored Breitbart so much traffic has declined 99%.
Facebook Mark Zuckerberg, Amazon's Jeff Bezos, Alphabet's Sundar Pichai, and Apple's Tim Cook, whose companies together represent about $5 trillion of market value, parried a range of accusations from lawmakers via video conference before the House Judiciary Committee's antitrust panel.
Congressman, well, first, to be clear, I think what you might be referring to happened on Twitter, so it's hard for me to speak to that, but I can talk to our policies about this. We do prohibit content that will lead to imminent risk of harm, and stating that there's a proven cure for COVID when there is in fact none might encourage someone to go take something that could have some adverse effects.
What began as 500 apps is now more than 1.7 million, only 60 of which are Apple software. If Apple is a gatekeeper, what we've done is open the gate wider.
The hearing marks the first time the 4 CEOs have appeared before lawmakers and was also the first appearance of Jeff Bezos before Congress. A detailed report with antitrust allegations and recommendations on how to tame their market power could be released by late summer or early fall by the committee, which has separately amassed 1.3 million documents from the companies.
And global affairs analyst Calvin Dack joins me via Skype from Washington to discuss this. Good to have you join us, Calvin Dack. Now, how are Americans reacting to this very tense hearing between Congress, or session between Congress and the tech giants?
Well, I think that there are kind of 2 themes that I would call it for how people are reacting and responding. The first one is what's really unique about this situation is when you think about those companies. I was thinking yesterday between Apple, Facebook, Google, and Amazon, that's 99% of most of what I use every day. And I'm not alone in that. So you're dealing with something that everybody has access to, but few people, particularly in Congress, understand. So if you don't really understand how something works, it's hard to regulate it. The other issue that we're dealing with is what Representative Jim Jordan said was a fact, that conservatives are being discriminated against on social media, which I don't believe is true. I think that some social media platforms have decided what is objectionable content because it poses a danger, and a lot of those groups happen to be conservative voices. So I think those are the 2 things that people are thinking about here in the U.S.
So you just made a very valid point. The fact that our lives now revolve around these tech giants. We use them every single day. So does this emphasize the opinion coming from Congress that perhaps these tech companies are becoming too powerful?
Well, yes, and I do think that they're responding to fears and anxieties from Americans, because you have some Americans who realize that they're now having something as an integral part of their lives. And especially during COVID, think about what our lives would be different without those devices. Most of what I purchased over the last 3 months has been through Amazon, everything from household supplies to computer equipment. So I think a lot of Americans are kind of getting anxious that something they depend on so much is so unregulated compared to other things like cars or building things or medicine. So I think that's what's making people nervous.
So when you put these four companies together, they are worth about 5 trillion naira. Calvin, if they were a company, or if they were a country, they would be one of the biggest economy in the world. So how possible is it to rein them in as Congress wants to do?
I don't think it's very possible at all, and let me tell you why. One of the things about our system of government here, it's intentionally designed to be slow. Now, some would argue that that was part of what the Founding Fathers designed it so that we wouldn't have radical changes that would bring about instability. Some also say that because there's so much partisanship, no one ever wants to compromise and actually get things done. So here's the simple answer. Right now in Congress, they are debating on COVID relief that ends this weekend, and they're nowhere near an agreement. I don't think that they would be even close to coming to an agreement on this because they can't really even get their act together for things that are more pressing. So I don't think we're going to see any changes anytime soon.
What about the issues around privacy? We know that the American Constitution is big on freedom of speech. So what about the issues around privacy?
Well, I think that's something that Congress, I think in the long term, should kind of put, not necessarily rein them in with laws, but kind of do something so that Americans feel that their information is protected. Because what a lot of Americans feel, and I am in this category, is that I love the tools and the products that these companies have provided. And no, I don't want to get rid of them. I love each and every one of them. However, I am aware that if not regulated, they have everything they could ever want to know about me, my spending habits, what I like, what I don't like. And so for that reason, I think that Congress should at least put guidelines in place so that we will feel more comfortable with the data we share and our privacy.
So these companies are also being accused of trying to use China to manipulate Congress. Tell us more about that.
Well, you know, that's another question that I think is important, but I don't really know how the U.S. Congress will deal with it. Because as you know, China, because they have a different system than ours, the way that they regulate or restrict these social media companies is much different. And these social media companies are companies for business. So a lot of things they are doing in China, they wouldn't do here and couldn't do here. And I think that when we look at the trade war, for example, and the escalating tensions between the US and China, these companies will have a big say because, as you mentioned, their economy, their worth are bigger than a lot of countries. So how they are able to make money and survive in China will affect how the U.S. deals with China because they're a major economic part of whatever deal we come up with.
But what sort of control or sanction do you think can be imposed to ensure that issues around privacy, issues around collusion with China are restricted?
I do think that if the Congress focuses on that particular issue, on the security and privacy issue, then I think there's room. Because then basically you say, if you want to operate in this country, here are the things that you must do. Now, that's a completely different conversation from breaking up what they're calling monopolies or talking about the antitrust implications of the way some of these companies run their business. But I think if they focus in on the privacy and security part, there is a possibility that we can have a little bit more internal security about the tools we use.
But is there a political twist or a political angle to this, though, saying that America has its election in November?
Yes, because one of the other issues with security, you know, as we were talking about privacy and security as far as what they know about Calvin getting out there, there's the other issue of security in that information about voting access to voting platforms, to request your ballots. They are involved. I mean, these companies are involved in making sure that happens. And if there is Chinese influence or other countries' influence in how these companies are run, we're looking at a situation where Chinese influenced private U.S. companies are controlling the flow of information about voting. And that has really dangerous implications. And I don't think there's any time before November for our Congress to really do anything that would have any effect.
So in 2016, Facebook was accused of having a lot of Russian adverts on its platform. Many said that that was to aid or allegedly aid President Trump. Are there any moves to ensure that these platforms do not influence the American election?
Now, I do think that is going to be a difference that we're going to see, because part of my communications business is we work with a lot of clients to do advertising on these platforms. And if you look at Twitter, for example, it wasn't a part of the hearing yesterday. They're not allowing political ads on certain issues and by candidates. Facebook has implemented regulations that started in the spring and that will be fully in place early fall, where you won't be able to see the same political ads and where you'll be able to opt out of even seeing any at all. So I do think that there are safeguards in place to not have 2016 repeated in that sense. What they do have to focus on is the security of information, not propaganda as we had in 2016.
So President Trump has been sanctioned or censored rather on Twitter. His son, Donald Trump Jr., has also been censored. So issues around censorship, did that also come up?
Well, not as much yesterday, but as you know, nothing happens in a vacuum. You probably saw that this morning President Trump is tweeting about delaying the election. And, with Donald Trump Jr., they were tweeting things about COVID and some other very misleading things. I think that is a very dangerous area to go down because it's a trap. If you take the social media posts and what they said isolated, then yes, it's misinformation, it's misleading. But then if you do it for them, you have to do it for other people who put up misleading things and put up opinions that may be dangerous if people act on them in illegal ways. So that's a very, very tough predicament that these companies are in because there are no rules. And Donald Trump Jr. and his father are pushing this to show that they think that they're being discriminated against because they're conservative.
Global Affairs analyst Calvin Dack, thanks for talking to us.
Thank you.